Listen, here's my recommendation. Grab your family, grab your friends, grab your neighbors, get to the poll, because if not, you're going to have another 2 or another 6 years of this craziness. So make sure you vote, all right?
President Trump's former fixer Michael Cohen explaining to CNN on Friday his recent tweet, calling on his fellow Americans to get out and vote, calling the midterms the most important vote in our lifetime. His plea comes after Cohen changed his voter registration from Republican to Democrat. Florida's statewide races have been neck and neck, but a new round of polling this weekend shows a bit of a tilt toward Democrats. The CNN SSRS poll has Democratic Senator Bill Nelson with a 5-point lead over Republican Governor Rick Scott, 50% to 45% among likely voters. Then in the governor's race, Tallahassee Mayor Andrew Gillum is ahead by 12 points over Republican Ron DeSantis, 54% to 42%. In last night's debate, both men were asked about President Trump's influence on kids. After that DeSantis campaign ad that showed him playing Build the Wall with his daughter and reading a Trump book to his son.
Do you think President Trump is a good role model for the children of Florida?
Well, Jake, my wife and I were poking a little fun at ourselves because of the way that campaign was going, and I'm proud of my family, though. I don't actually read The Art of the Deal to my son Mason. He's a great kid. He smiles at anything, but that's not necessarily his cup of tea. So here's what I know. I was very passionate about moving our American embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. Donald Trump promised it, and he followed through with it. And so to me, when you give your word and you follow through with it as an elected official, that is the model that we're supposed to do. He was right to move the embassy to Jerusalem. I was there for a historic event. I know Andrew didn't support that and doesn't think that's right, but to me, that was true leadership.
Mr. Mayor?
Confused by the question.
The question was whether or not he thinks President Trump is a good role model for the children of Florida.
That's what I thought originally. I got confused. So, no, he's not. Donald Trump is weak. And he performs as all weak people do. They become bullies.
Yeah, wow. I tell you what, that was quite a debate last night. The closing remark was something. Mike Barnacle, something else happened that was fascinating during that debate. After Parkland, after the massive school shootings that have been going on, Andrew Gillum actually went after the NRA for not negotiating, not compromising, not doing the most basic things for gun safety. And the Republican candidate stood mute, said nothing. That is certainly one way politics are changing. But I don't know if you saw much of that debate last night. But if Mayor Gillum was 12 points ahead before that debate, be interested to see how high those numbers go after the debate, because that one wasn't even close.
Yeah, Kristen, and let me ask you on that point. Andrew Gillum, and I'm trying not to be partisan here, but it was a very impressive performance last night by Andrew Gillum, and it was a very standard political and cautious performance, I would think, by the Republican candidate for governor, Mr. DeSantis. Did you see the debate?
Unfortunately, I did not.
Okay, so let's look at the numbers, this sudden jump to 12 points. What impact do you think, just on the clips that we saw and the general tenor of campaigns and the contrast between the two candidates, what's your estimate? Where are the numbers going to go here?
Well, one, I think it's interesting that there's such a big difference between the way the governor's race and the Senate race is playing out in that state. So you've had current Governor Rick Scott, who's been a vocal supporter of President Trump along the way, performing much more strongly than the gubernatorial candidate who, as you saw, ran that ad sort of saying, like, I am Trump light. Because I think Governor Scott has, his record as governor to run on there, where for Ron DeSantis, I think he's mostly known in the state of Florida as someone who has a very strong presence on Fox News, but is struggling to make that pivot away from the guy he needed to be to win the Republican primary to the guy he needs to be to win in a state that leans slightly red, but is ultimately a swing state. Whereas I think somebody like Rick Scott already has more of an established identity, which is how he's able to perform much more strongly in this environment and distance himself from the president.
Yeah, so Steve Kornacki, Florida, as Tim Russert would say. It remains the bellwether with, when it looked like Donald Trump was going to pull ahead and stay ahead in Florida, suddenly you knew that other states were going to fall. What's interesting in these two races is that, let's take the Senate race first. It's been a race run in three parts. Right after the primary, Gillum was ahead in just about every poll and ahead comfortably. I was surprised, but he was ahead by 3, 4, 5 points. The Kavanaugh hearings flattened that out. Suddenly it became close, but here we are moving beyond the Kavanaugh debates, and suddenly you have Gillum up comfortably, and now you have Bill Nelson for the first time up by, 5 points in this poll. Still could be an outlier, but at the same time, you have both Democratic candidates breaking pretty hard with 2 weeks to go.
Yeah, and I do want to see some more here just in terms of the outlier potential. But I would say overall, you're right. I mean, since the primary, it's been very consistent. Gillum has consistently led the governor's race. This is the largest margin I've seen him have a lead by, but he's consistently been ahead there. The question that's raised to me is there going to be an effect there where Gillum ends up helping Nelson survive because Scott, as Kristen says, has been running so much closer in that race. And the other variable I think you have to mention here is the fallout from the hurricane. So you've now had 2 polls taken in Florida since the hurricane. And what they've shown is there's very broad, I think not surprising here, there's very broad support for how Governor Scott handled the hurricane down there. Now, one of those polls actually put him ahead of Nelson by 2 points. This poll shows him behind Nelson by 5 points. Both of those polls show Gillum leading in the governor's race. So, again, it's a question here of has this thing broken open in a new way where Gillum is not just ahead, but is ahead decisively and is ahead at such a level that he can pull Nelson over the top? Or is it a bit of an outlier and maybe that Senate race is more in play? But I think, yeah, in the governor's race side, I think it's pretty clear there's an advantage to Gillum right here.
Boy, it certainly does look, John Heilman, like we're going to be following 2 tracks all the way to Election Day. The Nelson race is going to be tight. The Senate race is going to be tight all the way to the end. But Gillum does look right now like he has a little bit of space between himself and DeSantis, and he's back to where he was before the Kavanaugh hearings, looking pretty good against a guy who, as Kristen said, ran a scorched earth campaign, a Donald Trump campaign to win the primary. Maybe that works in Idaho. Probably doesn't work in the state of Florida.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think if you look at that Senate race, that is sort of a race that reflects the state of Florida. If you look at the governor's race right now, what you're seeing, I think, is just one of these races where the difference in candidate quality is the whole story. You have a candidate, again, as Mike said, not saying this in a partisan way, but if you just watch that debate last night, and you watch their performance over the course of the last 3 or 4 months, Gillum has a very powerful presence on the stump. He's got a very charismatic candidate. He's very good at what he's doing. His performance skills are very, very high. DeSantis's are not. And so in this moment, there's a lot of energy around the new face. Again, for a lot of Floridians, even if you go downstate in Florida, get down to the south part of Florida, Andrew Gillum is a fresh face in Florida, even though he's been mayor for a while up in Tallahassee. So people are just meeting him, and I think he's electrifying the Democratic base, and there are a lot of people in Florida who are seeing this guy, and the disparity between the 2 candidates in terms of what people are seeing on television every day is very, very wide, and I think that's starting to settle in down there.
All right, and a note, Morning Joe is going to be live in Florida this Friday. We're heading to
Rocco's Tacos.
John Heilman's favorite place, I'm sure, in Florida. Rocco's Tacos and Tequila Bar. That's just for you, John.
It's
at
in
6
Boca.
in the morning. It's in Boca.
My 2 favorite things on earth.
Exactly. If you're in Boca Raton, come by, stop, be part of the show.
Have some coffee.
Because, again, I mean, these 2 races that we've been talking about are going to be 2 of the most exciting races in America. For tickets and information, click on joe.msnbc.com. And as we always say, going to break, as we go to break, we mentioned Andrew Gillum's closing argument last night. Just 15 days until voters go to the polls. This was his closing argument.
Because my mother and father would have to get up so early in the morning to go to work, they would load us all into a car, drive us over to my grandmother's house where she would have a ritual and do 2 things before she'd let us cross the threshold of the door. She'd take her bottle of olive oil, also known as blessing oil, and build a cross on my forehead as a way to send us out into the day with a blessing and a covering. And then she would have this mantra where she'd say, go to school, mind your teachers, get your lesson, and one day bring that education home. She'd say, bring it home for your mama, for your daddy, who get out there and work on somebody else's job. Bring it home for your little brother and your little sister. What my grandmother was communicating to me was that it wasn't just about me. It's about all of us. And in Trump's America, we've been led to believe that we've got to step on our neighbor's shoulder in their face and their backs in order to get ahead. Well, I reject that. And we have an opportunity on November 6th as a collective, as a state, to say we deserve better. We want better. We want better schools, access to health care, a clean economy, a restorative justice system that works where hand in glove, the community and law enforcement work together for all of our benefit. I'm asking you all for the only thing in life that my mother ever told me to ask for, and that's a chance.
Thanks for checking out MSNBC on YouTube, and make sure you subscribe to stay up to date on the day's biggest stories. And you can click on any of the videos around us to watch more from Morning Joe and MSNBC. Thanks so much for watching.